All right, everybody set?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, hello. Just so you know who everyone is, you've heard the intros, but you should at least get to know everyone by name. That is Barbara,
Hello.
CMO of Grubhub, Chicago.
Exactly.
Lauren Crampsie is Senior Partner and Global CMO of Ogilvy and Mather. Jamie Moldafsky, CMO of a little company called Wells Fargo. And Tom Klein, CMO of MailChimp. Everyone, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so John set us up. You know that marketing is a field that is changing rapidly, evolving right in front of your eyes. So let me ask the panel the first question about evolution. Barbara, I'll start with you. What are you doing now in your job that you couldn't have imagined that you'd be doing 5 years ago?
I couldn't have imagined the rapidity with which we market today. The fact of being able to interact with your users every day, have data coming back and seeing what resonates and what doesn't resonate, I think is absolutely fantastic and very empowering. So that connection that one has actually with consumers today is something that I couldn't imagine we could do as marketeers 5 years ago when we were thinking about one campaign and getting it perfect actually with our agencies, and that perfection, being traded for authenticity, rapidity, and agility today is something incredibly empowering.
Okay, good. Well, with much data comes much responsibility.
Totally agree.
Lauren, what are you doing now that you couldn't have imagined 5 years ago?
I mean, I'm an interesting case because I'm the CMO of an agency,
Right.
which means I have no budget. So I think part of what I'm doing that I wasn't doing before was being able to do more with nothing. And obviously, social media has helped an enormous amount from that aspect. And then the other thing is change management. Never in a million years did I think that a CMO would be at the forefront of how companies need to evolve and adapt and change. And particularly as it relates to behavior and getting the employees in the company to embrace change and understand that change is okay and good. That's something that I think we're all going through in some way, and I never thought I would be doing.
Huh, that's interesting. Jamie, I'll put the same question to you, and you cannot say at Wells Fargo that you have no budget.
No, we do have a budget, which is good, but many more desires to use it. So, interesting. I would say I think being really the integrator across the company of customer experience and engagement, and the championing the customer in a very different way. So I think that because we are so complex now in terms of channels and customer segments and social media and the introduction of all of these different ways to engage with our customers, the need to have that sort of traffic controlled, if you will, seems to have fallen to the role of the CMO.
Huh, interesting. Tom?
Probably for me, this is probably a little bit more specific to MailChimp, but the story that I wouldn't have imagined that I'd be telling was that I'm supposed to help all of our customers learn how to do advertising. Right? And so some of that just ties to the fact that the company itself is changing, and we're looking to sort of take on more. But it also means that, from a marketing education ambition, there's more work to do. And so for a company that started in email, advertising is a giant new space, and we're looking to bring along all of our customers.
Well, I would say that is perhaps not surprising given the way that the industry is evolving, that everybody is doing everything. The barriers between what used to be separate functions are rapidly eroding. Lauren, I wanted to jump ahead because that is a great segue to the question of how the agency is evolving. It seems like agencies now have to do everything, and everybody else wants to do what agencies used to do. Talk about that.
So I think agencies don't have to be able to do everything. I think agencies have to know what they don't know. They have to know what they're good at and what they're not good at. But what they do have to be is they have to be the catalyst for collaboration. And they have to be the stewards for who we need to bring in, what partners we need to be collaborating with, and why. Particularly an agency like Ogilvy, which can do everything if you wanted us to. I often say to people, it's okay that we don't do everything for every single client, What's more important is that we know and understand who to bring in for what reason. Because, and I talked a little bit about this earlier, because we're kind of going through a rebundle in some ways of creative and media, we cannot, our client has so much on her or his plate every single day. We cannot rely on the client to bring the media agency to the table and the creative agency to the table and the innovation agency to the table. Oh, and guess what? Deloitte now is an agency, so we have to get them involved. Like, no, the agency and the central agency needs to be the one that's populating the roundtable. And I think that that's very, very hard, because a lot of times agencies want to be able to do it all. And I think it's actually more powerful to know how to bring it all together in a way that works best for the client.
Good, interesting. Let's talk about platforms for a second. So 77% of all digital advertising, 99% of the growth runs through two companies, Google and Facebook. How do you innovate in a world that's dominated by those two behemoths? Jamie, I'll put it to you.
I'd say we innovate both with them, and then we innovate independently also. I mean, we have 70 million customers, so we have direct relationships with those 70 million customers, and yet there are many situations and times when our customers want to interact with us through Facebook or through Google or through some other platform. And so the answer to me is, we want to be where the customer wants us to be when they want us to be there with the right opportunity. You have to both partner and learn how to optimize through those platforms, as well as cultivate and nurture the relationship we have directly.
Are there tools in particular that help you cultivate that direct relationship?
I think tools, think about that. I think that, I mean, again, I think we work so deeply and closely with those organizations that, certainly we work directly with them. We also optimize, obviously, through other ways as well. But we're constantly tweaking all of those models to best understand for any given, and again, lots of customers, lots of products and services, lots of different programs running. Yeah. We tend to control a little more of that optimization along with our media agency, because again, to your point about, you have to have hubs, right? And you have to be able to optimize at some point. That we find that it's better if we can help optimize that.
Okay, good. Barbara, let me put the question to you. In that world, in a Google and Facebook world in which we just are, which we just slightly inhabit, how do you work?
Well, we use them for sure for scale. We want to be where our consumers are, and no shame in using them actually. Now, in order to establish a really deep relationship with our consumers, we need to be trying new things all the time. And that is in the mix of media, in the new providers, in the content, and mixing all that to have a deeper relationship with every interaction. And so I think one of the opportunities is how to create that special magic potion of channels and creative and product to create the biggest effect with our consumers. And that's why I think the role of a CMO is getting more and more fun and more broad at the end, because we have a say on product and we have a say on the spend, we have a say on the growth. And that is really cool as an evolution for a role.
Okay, good. Lauren, you want to tackle that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of, build it and they will come. I think if you're innovating in general, you're innovating with Facebook and Google. And I think it's less about how do you innovate with Facebook and Google, and it's more about how do you innovate, period. Because the natural innovation process will lead you to where the fish are. I think it's hard to get in that mind frame, because in some ways, to me, Facebook and Google are price of entry at this point. I wouldn't even call it innovation. Everyone should be working with them and knowing how to work with them. Right. So it's more about how do you instill a sort of heartbeat and pulse of innovation within your company. Jamie is being humble about her accelerator program at Wells Fargo, but she was telling me about it backstage, and that's a great way, I think, to just instill innovation behavior and a way of working within your organization.
All right. Is Snap a challenge to the big incumbents, Tom? And are you doing anything with them?
We've done probably a couple different things. I feel like if you've got a great creative platform and something that really connects with your customer, all of these are really just networks that help you kind of fish where the fish are. And so I would say Snap would be similar to Facebook and Google, a great way to kind of connect with your customers. We spend so much time with our customers who are small businesses, probably a lot of them are in this hall, trying to figure out where to spend their time and their money. And I think that's one of the challenges for them is for a lot of these new platforms, they tend to target big advertisers first, and then later on, as they get their footing, they'll open up things for smaller businesses.
Yeah, okay, good. Jamie, wanted a Snap? Is that part of your an arrow in your quiver?
Very similarly, I think the theme is you need the right message and creative and opportunity to make Snap work, and so we're a financial services brand. We'll go wherever our customers are, but only as so long as we're meaningful and engaging in that environment. And so we definitely have, along with many, many other platforms, continue to test and learn. Some are just more naturally suited to customers who are in the market for products or services or want to engage in certain types of financial discussions, and some are less suited to it. So it's a little bit of finding that right magic, and if it works, it's great, and if not, we continue to always test at the margin to make sure we're not missing anything.
Okay, all right. Now you can hardly do a panel like this without bringing up the want to make a quote about half of your advertising dollars are wasted. You just don't know which half. I think probably in the modern era, you might want to say it. Half of my measured reach is bullshit. I just don't know which half. So I want to talk about your confidence and your ability to measure return on investment. How's that changed in the past 5 years? More confident or less confident? What do you trust the most? What do you trust the least? Barbara?
Way more confident.
Way more confident.
Oh yeah. Data is the center of decision for investment in any tech company I've worked for, and I've been in tech for 20 years. I've seen an evolution in how much data one can get to really measure, test again, and the agility of it all that is quite surprising. I would say the danger, though, of being obsessed with data is being drawn in data and too much data. And I've seen paralysis, actually, of many companies because they need to feel security through data for their decisions.
Yes.
And so I think it's never been easier to have data to measure the return on investment. But one, I think, must not forget the role of intuition and the role of gut feel somehow to make some decisions and then measure, indeed, whether they worked or not.
Mm-hmm. Good. Lauren, I see you nodding. You agree?
No, I love that answer, of course. I think that if you have a very compelling insight that's based on consumer data and also what's happening in culture, that is ultimately going to lead you to a greater ability to understand and have a client who believes that you're authentic in the ROI behind it. Because without that insight, it is hard to measure, and you don't know what 50% you're even measuring at all. So I think it's important as we think about sort of brand belief and brand authenticity, this layer underneath, which is sort of the micro brand moments and how they show up. They have to show up in ways that are built on customer data. I think up here, it's what Barbara was saying about intuition. But when you get that one layer below, if everything goes back to a customer insight that was built on data about that customer group, then the ability to measure ROI is much easier than it ever has been.
Okay. Well, let me segue to a related question. Mark Pritchard, the CMO of P&G, issued a kind of manifesto back in January about data, partly about data. he called it the crappy media supply chain. So lousy advertising followed by running on untransparent media through programmatic buys and other things that he called kind of crappy. So at Wells Fargo, Jamie, how are you avoiding what Pritchard calls the crap trap?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really thoughtful about, I mean, so even programmatic is a good example that we're tiptoeing our way into that because I think that, again, we use pervasive channels, for everything. And so I think we feel very good about our overall ROI. I think attribution is a real challenge. And so I think we are continuing to focus on how do we refine our attribution modeling? What was that last click or the last, the last piece that made the difference? That's very hard to get to. And so I think we're just thoughtful about where do we invest, how do we invest and learn. And we've been investing more heavily where we feel confident that our own media mix efforts are yielding the right insights and the right direction.
Okay, good. Tom, avoiding the crap trap?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that we're positioning MailChimp as the solution, right? So, we have a lot of customers who they're in the e-commerce business, so they'll connect their e-commerce store to MailChimp, and then they might use MailChimp to buy a Facebook ad or send email, but in the instance of a Facebook ad, we can essentially show them, it's a closed loop, right? So we can show them, who purchased what, and what we're seeing is that when you start with a list in MailChimp, right, you might have an email list of customers, we're seeing basically 2 times the revenue if you start with a list and use that to create a lookalike audience in Facebook. So not only are we seeing better return, a higher return on investment, but also there's total visibility to this is what my ad was, literally down to this is what showed up in the shopping cart, right? Down, this is the amount of business that was closed. These are the new customers. We're getting to the point where we can say, if we had to do sort of a back of the envelope lifetime customer value, we could do that too, right? Because we're really in the position of trying to help people understand it's not just what you sell today, it's I've acquired some new customers,
right.
And all of that is sort of how I'm looking at the value of an investment in advertising.
Let me segue a little bit to a slightly different topic. Every company in its lifetime will make mistakes. Some of those land on the CMO's desk to fix in particularly striking ways. One of the more public faux pas recently occurred at your shop, Jamie. Talk a little bit about
somewhere else with that.
I know.
Talk a little bit about
But that's okay, we'll take it.
crisis management, managing a message when the news is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is back to data being your friend, and it helps to also have, a history of building loyal customers. And so, we fortunately have always deeply, profoundly tried to understand our customers and where they are in the market and where they are in terms of trust and perception and reputation. And so the good news is we had a lot of those metrics in place. And then when this hit us in September, we doubled down on that. And so this is where data is so important. So we really used daily, nightly, weekly, monthly polling and research to get those insights that were so helpful in helping us understand how to navigate the last 6 months. And what that's led to is we've really kind of gone onto 2 tracks. One track was this very foundational, we screwed up, we need to fix it, and we need to show people how we're fixing it. That is just step number 1. And we had a lot of messaging around that, and that affected a lot of our marketing spend and a lot of our marketing messaging until we earned the right back, which we launched 2 weeks ago, a new campaign called Building Better Every Day, which is really about the things that we do every day to also help our customers be successful. But we had to measure literally day by day, week by week, when we got permission really to come back and re-engage in a relationship with our customers who are rebuilding trust, right? So the first pieces of that were about rebuilding that trust. Now people actually want to know, what are you doing? I bank with you, I really want to know what you're doing that's exciting for me. And so I would just say, you, as a CMO, data is your friend, and the more data we had, the easier it was to navigate those waters, because people get very emotional, and there's a lot of people out there sharing this with us right now, unfortunately, but I think in this world that we live in, crises happen really quickly. And that ability to be fact-based and rational and have a strategy helps you navigate it much more successfully than I think if you're if you're literally getting tossed, right, day to day, because it's very challenging with social media today to navigate and to control your own message.
Yes, yes, for sure. Everybody wants to sell to millennials. It's kind of a magic buzzword of a generation. Grubhub has mastered that art, not just of selling to them, but feeding them as well, where they don't even have to leave their apartment. So now that you've sold to millennials, what's left? What are you going to do next?
I think it's the latest that we have seen works really well is value expression of a company. So that means open up your values to degrees that we haven't done before. I'm going to give you an example.
Please.
So we care a lot about gender equality, especially in tech. And when you think about also the restaurant business, so Grubhub puts in connection hungry diners with restaurants, right? And you look at the gender equality in the restaurant business, you actually realize that there's a huge gap. And think about a lot of different places around the world who cooks at home. In many, many different homes, is actually women. So why is there such a gender inequality then in the restaurant space and among chefs? So we decided to just point at that fact during International Women's Day, and we decided to highlight 3 women chefs with their positives, their struggles, their stories, open up to public, and also point the fact that we still have a lot to do as a society to help with equality. Well, that story is related to Grubhub, but it's bigger than Grubhub. And I'm actually very happy to say that it was the best performing video in the history of Grubhub. And I'm even more happy to say that the ones that saw that video actually came back more often to Grubhub than the ones that didn't see the video. So it created business impact on top of making us very proud inside. So that value creation and that demonstrating your values by doing instead of by saying is very important, and resonating and creating loyalty with millennials more than ever.
Good, good, thank you. Tom, as you pointed out, MailChimp is in the business of helping small businesses succeed in this field in particular. So what are the things that small businesses get wrong that you observe at MailChimp, and what can you tell the audience about what they should avoid doing?
Sometimes the old rules are the good ones. So if you just said, hey, test and learn, or at least the old, the advice has always been, build your list and send to your list, right? So, however, these days, managing a marketing program, if you're trying to build a business, is very difficult, and you don't have a lot of time. You're maybe, I'll just pick an e-commerce example that comes to my head that I visited recently. It was a small shoe company in Austin, and the person that was in charge of marketing, it was just one of 100 things that she was responsible for, and it was all social media, everything on the website. That's marketing was a separate task. So what we're seeing is, marketing automation is a way to kind of focus our customers on specific things that they can set up once, and then really think about the customer experience in a way that's thoughtful, still be as weird, as quirky, or as fun as their brand really lets them be, or as they can be. But then those automations run, and they can really get back to business. And so yesterday we announced that we're making bringing freemium to marketing automations, so our customers can kind of start there. And because we've seen that when they do that, the program kind of takes on a life of its own. We still think they do need to have an email program and an advertising program, but that's what we're seeing is actually working. And it's a sort of a sign of the times that marketing automation and marketing are sort of all one, coming together. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the evolving part of the ever-evolving CMO.
Well, that is a pretty good segue to the last question that we have time for. Thanks for that that softball, Tom.
I was hoping you would forget the last
All
question,
right.
Tom.
So, all right, so we started by talking about how your job has changed in ways you couldn't imagine from 5 years ago. So let's spin it forward now with our last answer in the last 2.5 minutes. What's going to happen in the next 5 years that is going to surprise everyone else in your industry except you, of course? Lauren?
I knew you were going to start with me. I knew it. I think the pivot from a CMO's sole responsibility being reaching their consumer, and not sole, their most important responsibility being reaching their consumer. I think what we'll see in the next 5 years, at least from an agency standpoint, is their biggest responsibility being reaching their employees. And I think the focus from external messaging to internal messaging is going to be more important than it's ever been before. And I would even go as far as to say you may have CMOs that are in charge of talent as well as marketing.
Interesting. All right, Tom? You were eager to answer this question. Go ahead.
Well, maybe it's wishful thinking. I feel like there are a lot of things that feel they could be automated. So where do I spend my money? Where do I spend my time? And what marketing assets do I need to create? Yes or no? I feel like that we're going to get a lot smarter about providing that kind of navigation or guidance. And ideally that sets up small business people so that they can focus on the communication part, right? So that they can build their brand, they can communicate and realize that there's a person on the other end, right, of the stuff that's going out there, and they can focus, and ideally we'd have and I said it was going to be wishful thinking, just this explosion of creativity and sort of connection between brands that can really empathize and their customers.
Okay. Barbara?
I'm imagining a future where there's a lot of different devices that are smart, and right now we are very centered on the phone, and we're very centered on online. But then think about Alexa, think about your environments actually getting smarter and being more at the service of humans. And so I wonder what marketing possibilities we're going to have with an environment that is a lot more connected and intelligent and at the service of human beings. And I think whomever is thinking about creative solutions to, communicate somehow with users in an efficient, quick way that adds value in a uber-connected world is going to be winning the day of tomorrow. And we all go and look at our phones like this a lot of hours in the day. Is that the most efficient human state? Do we want to get that out of the way? And so what is that world where we don't have a phone in front of our face all the time? And then how do brands actually exist and communicate when the phone is in our pocket but still doing things for us in a different way? So kind of maybe, I don't know if it's 5 years or more, but I wish that we're going towards that direction.
Okay, so we have 3 5-year visions of an explosion of creativity, marketing in a world where you don't have to deliver the message in a screen but can be in the environment, and one vision in which CMOs have yet another job, being the talent manager as well. Jamie, wrap it up. 5 years from now.
I mean, I sort of think of it as what has always been sort of an outside in kind of becomes inside out, which is that I think, marketers have always been responsible for kind of bringing the outside world into their organizations and finding those right leverage points, but still then being the connection point to their customers. I think it's going to be the opposite, which is harnessing, and maybe it's a little of the talent piece, but harnessing the power of your company and your organization and becoming more ubiquitous outside of the company, right? So really being, levered up through all of these other ways of engaging with customers. I think we'll own a lot less of it, but those who are successful will figure out how to be embedded in everything else.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Well, that's a pretty rosy outlook, except for all the extra work that CMOs will have. All right. Please join
I'd
me
have
in
someone
thanking the
doing
panel.
it. It would just be maybe I looked in on them once a month or something.
All right. Thank you, Laura. And thanks to our panel.